expect you to be ready to go right now. They don't think that when you're a senior in high school, they can put you on the field with their starters and you're good to go. What they're looking at is, how did you develop your high school?
One of my old presentations is playing in the background. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Technical glitch. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We have some people with us on our Zoom link and some people watching through YouTube and some through our Twitch channel. And all of those are fine. If you have not registered, though, on our website and you want the handouts at the end, just make sure you go to our website, southmountainlacs.com/college-prep, and register for the workshop so that I have an email address to send you the handouts. But otherwise, Zoom, YouTube, Twitch, watch however it works for you. Tonight, we're going to talk about college admissions and the Common App. Our focus is for 2022s because they're the ones that will be applying now in the very near future for next year. But if you have younger kids or if you're a 23 or 24, that's fine too. You can hang out and kind of get a little bit ahead of the game and know what to expect. The first thing we'll do is start the biggest myths about college admissions, and it kind of goes two different directions. Unfortunately, a lot of students assume if their grades are excellent and their test scores are really good, that they can just get accepted to any top school they apply to. Or conversely, if they had a not so great semester or didn't do as well as they would like on the SAT, that there's no chance they can get into a good school. And neither of those things are true. Schools look nowadays at a lot more than grade test scores. And so you can have a 4.0 unweighted GPA, and you can have a 1580 on your SATs out of 1600 or a 35 out of 36 on the ACT and still not get admitted to Stanford or Berkeley or a number of other schools, because they really look at a lot of different things besides grades or test scores. Having good grades, having good test scores absolutely helps, but it's not the only thing. So most schools now use more of a holistic admission process. And so they consider multiple factors when they look at a student. And what they're doing is they're looking at the whole person and what unique skills or abilities you might bring to the school, what makes you unique, what might you bring to the community that they can't get somewhere else. So we're going to talk about what I kind of like to call the STAR system because it's easier for students to remember. And so there are 5 points around the STAR that we'll talk about that the admissions folks will typically use. One of the categories they will look at absolutely is your academics. So that will be things like your GPA, both weighted and unweighted, as well as your test scores. Something that students need to keep in mind, there are kids applying to college that are at schools that have little or no opportunity to take honors courses or AP courses. So they don't really have the opportunity to have a weighted GPA. So for some institutions, they might give a lot more weight to your unweighted GPA for a more even comparison against kids who don't have the option of having a weighted GPA because those kinds of courses are not available to them at their school. So when you're looking at applying for colleges, you'll give things like a weighted and an unweighted GPA, but understand that in many cases, a lot of institutions are far more concerned with your unweighted GPA than your weighted GPA. Also in the academic category, most institutions only give you one score for academics. So what that means is they're looking at your grades and your test scores, and they are combining them into one score. So what I would say to students who maybe had a semester that wasn't so great, you can and should work really hard to keep your grades up and try and raise your GPA. But mathematically, the way it works is the more courses you've taken, the harder it is to bring up a GPA because each A is incrementally less important because you have so many classes kind of counteracting it. So if you had a bad semester or year, it's difficult to bring the GPA up. Absolutely do what you can to get the best grades you can and bring your grades up. That having been said, one of the best ways to raise your academic score is to get good test scores to help kind of counteract a not so stellar GPA. And even if you have a great GPA, that doesn't mean you can just blow off tests. Don't do it. What I recommend to students with the ACT and the SAT is get a practice book, get some practice tests, try them both out, and try them under test-like conditions. So sit there quietly with nothing else around, time yourself. See how you do on the different exams. Some kids do much better on the SAT than the ACT. Other kids do much better on the ACT. Other kids are kind of the same either way. It doesn't really matter. But if you're practicing and you do a lot better on the ACT every time you do practice tests than the SAT, then maybe the ACT is what you need to take, or vice versa. So kind of because not everybody scores the same on both tests. So that's something to consider. But if you're looking to improve your academic score, one of the best ways to do it, because your grades are kind of already in and they've been building over a period of years, is to study hard and get a good test score. And that can really kind of help raise your academic score in the application process. The next category, different schools, again, we'll call it different things, but intellectual curiosity. What they're really looking for is what kinds of things interest you, what drives you, what motivates you intellectually, what sorts of things are you involved in? Do you participate in speech and debate? What types of classes are you most focused on? Those sorts of things is what they're looking at. What academically interests you? And it can be all kinds of things. You know, are you the president of a book club? And that could be in school, outside of school, but they're looking for things that intellectually challenge and drive you. What motivates you that way, but not necessarily your straight academic grades, but what other kinds of things intellectually motivate you? Are you the kid that has the telescope at home that's keeping up on what's going on in the night sky, who's always out there at, 4 o'clock in the morning when there's a comet coming by and you're out there with your scope? Those are the kinds of things they're interested in about a student. What intellectually drives them outside of the classroom. Their next big category is impact. So what difference are you making in your school, in your community, a sports team if you're doing that sort of thing, but they're looking at what kind of impact you're making in the world around you. So are you a tutor for other students at your school? Do you perform service with your church or some other community organization? Those kinds of things. What are you doing to impact your community? And so there's a score for that as well. And then character. So they're looking at who you are as a person. What kinds of outside activities are you doing, and how does that reflect on who you are as a person? What are teachers or other recommenders saying about your integrity? What kind of leadership skills might you have demonstrated through high school? Those kinds of things. But that's what they're looking for. What is your character, who you are as a person? How do you interact with others? Those kinds of things. And then the last one is skills and abilities. And those are sort of things that are unique to you. Do you play a particular sport? Do you have some sort of artistic skill? Are you always drawing? Do you sculpt things? Do you play the violin, the bass, the trumpet, the flute? What, anything, all those kinds of things. What kinds of skills and abilities might you have? Are you an excellent woodworker? Do you work on cars all the time? Lots of kids think things like that don't matter, but it's a unique skill and ability not everybody has, and absolutely it matters when you're applying to college. The schools want to know those kinds of things about you and those sorts of interests that you might have. Now, it's important to note for students, the colleges and universities that you'll be applying to are interested in all these things about you, but they're really interested mostly in you focusing on what you've done in your years of high school. So they don't really care if you did some volunteer work in elementary school with a church group that you don't do anymore. Now, if you started doing some volunteer work in 5th grade where you went with your family to the homeless shelter and you've been doing that ever since, it's certainly okay to say, I've been doing that for X number of years, and discuss that in your application. But things you did for a few months or a year in elementary school or middle school that you have not continued doing don't belong on your college application. You're sticking with things you have done in high school. Also, you don't have to include absolutely everything. And we'll talk about a little bit more about why later, but schools are trying to get a picture of who you are as a person, and you want to give them a consistent story of yourself, who you are as a person, as an applicant, as a prospective college student. And so you don't want 100 different activities, half of them you tried a few months. You want to show them who you really are consistently and the kinds of things that demonstrate that. So it's typically things that you've done a little longer, or even if you haven't done them too long, you started recently, things that really resonate with you and tell them something about who you are. So you don't have to include absolutely everything. You want to include the important things that tell them who you really are. So that's that central theme. We want to make sure the picture that we're painting when we apply to colleges is pretty consistent about who we are. So kinds of courses we've taken in high school, some of them will ideally align with the kinds of things where we've demonstrated intellectual curiosity. And those things might align with some of our community impact or service work we may have done, leadership in organizations, those kinds of things, or other unique skills and abilities that we may have. So we want to see some sort of alignment so that, again, the schools see a consistent picture of who you are instead of just random stuff all over the place that makes no sense. We want it to be a clear story about who you are. So one of the first things you'll need to do is create a profile. Now, there are right now over 900 colleges and universities that use the Common App. Some use the Coalition app, which is similar but a little bit different. The Common App is much more popular. Good, most, if not all, of the colleges you'd be interested in would use the Common App. There are some exceptions. Georgetown has their own application. They don't do the Common App or the Coalition app. They just don't care. If you want to go to Georgetown, you're applying to Georgetown separately from anything else you do. The UC system has their own preferred application as well. So there are a few exceptions, but Again, like I said, over 900 colleges and universities use the Common App. So odds are good for most of you, most if not all of the colleges you're interested in will be on the Common App. Even if you do have to use a separate application, a lot of this stuff will still be very similar, the kinds of things you're going to have to put together anyway. They still look at the process holistically. They'll still want the same kind of information. Just unfortunately, you'll have to input it twice, once in the Common App and once in that particular school or system's separate application. The Common App is technically open right now because it never really fully closes. But if you create an account now, they update their system. They're currently on the 2021 application cycle. So if you create an account now, when their system updates, you're relying on everything updating in your profile. So I don't recommend it. The 2022 application is updated and fully opens August 1st. And typically August 1st of every year is when the Common App makes their changeover. So what I always recommend to students to just make it easy, wait until after August 1st. So they've done all their updates, they're in the new system, they've changed all their dates and deadlines and all that fun stuff, and then create your profile. That way you don't have to worry about whether or not things update right or you have the right or wrong date. They've already taken care of their system, and so you're just right in the 2022 application system, which is where you want to be. So once you've created a profile, which is pretty easy, they just want basic information, name, email, address, who you are, that kind of thing. Make sure you use an email that you check regularly because the Common App system may, throughout the process, try and communicate with you. So you want to be checking those emails just in case anything comes up, a date change, some sort of issue with something loading, you want to know right away. You want to get those emails. Once you've got that profile, you can go through their system and add colleges to your list. And so these are the colleges where you're interested in applying. The Common App, the max is 20 colleges. So you can only have 20 colleges in your list at a time. You can add and remove all day long until you apply. Once you've applied to an institution, you can't remove them from your list, which makes sense. You've already applied. But really, you shouldn't have a need for anywhere near 20 colleges. You might start with 18, 19, 20 and kind of narrow it down before you apply. But as a general rule, students shouldn't be applying to more than 10 colleges. Some schools have individual application fees for their school, others don't. The schools that do have fees typically have waiver options. So if you're applying to a school that has an expensive fee and you're worried you can't afford it, there are options where you can apply for a fee waiver. So kind of keep that in mind. And as you're looking at colleges, if you think you might need a fee waiver, reach out to them right away to start that process so that you know where you stand there. But you'll want to just add those colleges to your list so you can see what they require and what their deadlines are. The Common App allows you to put everything in at once, but the different schools will require different things. So that's something to keep in mind. And the sooner you sort of narrow down your colleges and get them on the list, the sooner you can make sure you're going to get together everything you need. And then we're going to want to gather whatever requirements we have for those schools. So that'll be your test scores. For some schools, they will only take the SAT. Some will take the SAT or the ACT. Some will only take the ACT. So that's something too you might want to consider when you're looking at what test or tests you might want to take. Other schools are test optional. So you don't necessarily have to test. Something to keep in mind, even if you're applying for schools where the SAT and or ACT are optional, you may want to take those tests anyway because there are a number of scholarships out there that use those test scores as one of the criteria to evaluate your scholarship application. And so even if you don't need the test into a college of your choice, you might need the test for some scholarships. So it's certainly worth considering anyway. Even if every school where you're going to apply is test optional, you may want to consider taking those tests anyway. There are fees with the tests, but also both the ACT and SAT offer fee waivers. So that's something as well for students who are concerned about the cost of that. When you use the Common App, you'll submit a required essay, and then a number of colleges also have supplemental essays, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you'll want to be prepared for that, for submitting your standard essay as well as any kind of supplemental essay. And you'll also want to check, once you've added colleges to your list, what are their deadlines, and they will all be different. Every college has very different admissions deadlines, and many colleges have multiple deadlines. So some colleges offer early admit or early decision options, and those are typically around November or December, but again, it really varies from one college to another. A college might have an early decision due date of November 7th, and another one might not be till December 15th. So make sure you're looking at the colleges you're interested in, what those deadlines are. Also, make sure you understand the obligation. So for a number of colleges, if you apply for early admission, when you apply that way, you're essentially agreeing to a contract with the school that if they accept you, you will attend. So make sure you understand the obligation if you choose early admit or early decision kind of applications. Do you have to go there if you're accepted? Because for some of those applications, that is what you're agreeing to. So it's great if you're absolutely certain that's the school you want, and you and your family are good with that, you're aware of the costs, you're ready to go. If you are not sure, and you're still kind of really liking 3 or 4 colleges, you're not dead set on a particular institution, don't apply early admit if that school requires you to attend. You've got to be certain that's where you want to go. Then for regular admission, the schools really vary. They can have deadlines in December, in January. Some of them have deadlines even a little bit later than that. But you want to make sure you know what those deadlines are. Once you've got everything together and you've got it into your profile, you can apply to colleges and submit those applications. On the one hand, you don't want to rush and just put everything in there and hit apply and say, hey, I'm done. You want to make sure you're putting forth the best application you can, with your materials presenting you in the best possible light so you have the best chance of getting accepted to schools you're interested in. But you also don't want to take too much time or procrastinate. I will tell you from my time serving on different admissions committees, every school is a little bit different, but a lot of schools, as they receive applications, they start reviewing them. So what happens is, if we have, say, an application deadline of December 1st, we don't get a whole lot of applications October 1st. So if I'm serving on an admissions committee, come the week of October 1st, someone might hand me a stack. Now it's more electronically than a literal stack, but I might get a stack of 3 or 4 applications I have to review, and I have more than a week to do it. So I can take my time and really look at the materials those kids have submitted and consider everything about them and whether or not they're a good fit for the institution or the program or whatever it is. On the other hand, if the deadline is December 1st and you wait and you apply December 1st, I don't get a stack, this big of 3 or 4 or even 10 applications. I might be getting a stack of 50, 100, 400 applications. By the time you get really close to a deadline, at a lot of institutions, the admissions officers are looking at 50 or more applications a day. Now, that's a lot of applications, particularly if you're looking at a holistic review process and you've got to look at all these aspects of a student, and you're getting 50 or more a day for several weeks to try and get through the huge stack of applicants that have submitted at the last minute to an institution. Think about how little time the admissions officer has to spend on your application, which means if there's anything that's less than stellar, they don't have a lot of time to find mitigating factors in your application. where if you've applied earlier, they have more time to find those things in your application that really sell you in a positive way. And even if you don't have anything that is particularly concerning and you're just a great all-around student and you feel comfortable, the admissions officer still has more time to get to know you as a student, and they're more likely to be interested in you as a potential candidate when they've had more time with your application. So that is something to consider. I don't recommend waiting till the day of, the day before, a week before the application deadline to submit. If your materials are ready to go and you're comfortable that you're presenting yourself in the best light you can, don't wait till the last minute to apply. Apply earlier so admissions officers have more time to look at your materials. So if you're looking at what kind of colleges you want to put in your Common App profile that you've created, we've talked about this in other seminars. Ideally, for most students, you want 2 or 3 reach schools, 4 or 5 target schools, 2 to 3 safety schools. And again, something to keep in mind, a reach school is any school that accepts less than 15% of their applicants. So it doesn't matter if you have a 4.0 unweighted GPA and you actually went in there and got a 1600 out of 1600 on the SAT. Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Northwestern, Duke, they're all still reach schools for you. They turn down kids with perfect scores every day. So it's not about your GPA or your test scores. It's about the percent of students they admit. So any school that's accepting less than 15% of their applicants is a reach school for everyone. That's just how it is. You may or may not get in, so you still want to put forth your best possible application. Target schools are generally accepting around the 50th percentile with GPA and test scores. So the better your GPA and test scores, the better your holistic application, the more likely you are to get accepted. And you're certainly more likely to get accepted to target schools than reach schools. Safety schools are schools that are typically accepting most of the students that apply. And students at or above the 75th percentile in terms of GPA and test scores. And those are schools that typically, if your grades and test scores are good, odds are very high you would be getting accepted to those schools. So you kind of want to mix to make sure. And I will tell students, I tell them this all the time, it's not personal. Strange things happen where a student might apply to both MIT and Cal Poly and get into one and not the other, and they kind of can't figure out, well, how did I get into one and not the other? Or they apply to both Harvard and Yale and they get accepted to one and denied at the other. Part of it is how you present your application, and even if your materials are the same for the most part, both places, with the possible exception of your supplemental essay questions, it also is based on what other kinds of applicants they get. So, for example, Arizona is a little bit different because here we don't have a lot of, small liberal arts colleges. But if you're a California student and you're applying to small liberal arts colleges in California, there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of students in California who are California students applying to small California liberal arts colleges. It's really hard to stand out, because there are thousands of you. If you are a California student applying to a high academic small liberal arts school in New Hampshire, you stand out, because there aren't that many kids from California applying to small liberal arts schools in New Hampshire, in Maine, in Vermont, those kinds of things. So schools do consider that when they're looking at the student body mix, the uniqueness, the diversity. They look at those sorts of things. So you may not get accepted to a school that's very close to where you live and get accepted to a school that you thought was more of a reach that's farther away, because you're unique and you're different relative to the rest of their applicant pool. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Sometimes admissions decisions will surprise students. Don't take it personally. The schools are really looking for students that are the right fit and the right mix. They don't want to accept a class where every student is so much alike. They want a bunch of kids that are very different so that they can learn from each other, develop intellectually together, grow together. So again, with the Common App, you're going to want to start completing things early. So at some point soon after August 1st, create your profile. Pick your colleges. Again, before you apply, you can change them. But if there are colleges you know you want to apply to, get those on your list. Get to know what deadlines are. Get your materials ready. Know what test scores they require. Start getting your information in about your grades. So pull up an unofficial copy of your transcript and start putting in what courses you took and the grades. Put in your test scores if you've taken them already and what the dates were that you took the tests. Get those kinds of, that sort of basic information, just get it in there and out of the way. And then you can start spending your time on putting in the activities that really matter to you, looking at working on your essays, the kinds of things that really give you an opportunity to shine, but will take time to do it right. And again, you're going to want to apply early. You don't necessarily have to apply for early decision, early admission, those sorts of things, but you don't want to wait till the absolute last minute of an application deadline. Another little caveat here, for some schools, your likelihood of getting in is better if you do early admission or early decision. Again, depending on the school, you may have to commit to going there if they accept you. So don't do it if you're not sure you're going to go. But for other schools that do early admit or early decision, your odds of getting in aren't any better. It really varies from school to school. Most colleges and universities will have that statistic somewhere in the information for potential new students. So you can kind of do a search for that on their websites. They all keep it in different places. So you really have to go to the school's website and search. But again, a lot of them post that. So early admission or early decision isn't always a better option. So keep that in mind as well. If they accept, say, 60% of the students who apply early admission and 60% of the students who don't, there's no advantage to applying early admission. Some other things to keep in mind. Some schools only use FAFSA, which is the federal form for financial aid. Others use the CSS financial aid profile. Some use both. Some schools, you can go to the college you're interested in, to their website, and go to their financial aid pages, or call the financial aid office. Sometimes they have their own forms they use. So you'll want to kind of check that out once you've narrowed down the colleges you're interested in. But whatever they require, you want to start filling those things out early. With FAFSA, it opens every year, October 1st for the following year. So for those of you who are 2022s, starting this coming October 1st, you'll be able to fill out the FAFSA to get your financial aid eligibility for the next academic year. So the sooner you fill that out, the better, because a lot of financial aid, there's a certain amount of dollars available, and it goes to eligible students first come, first serve, and when it's gone, it's gone. So if you fill out your application form after all the money's gone, even if you're eligible, the money's gone. So do your FAFSA early, as soon after October 1st as you can. The CSS financial aid profile that a lot of schools use, many schools have their own funds, and they use that or their own profile to allocate those funds. So you're going to want to get that financial documentation together and turned in as early as possible as well. Because again, many of those scholarships are also awarded, whether it's a scholarship, a grant, those kinds of things, they're awarded in many cases to eligible students first come, first serve. So again, if you wait too long, when the money's gone, it's gone. So as best you can, get those kinds of things filled out early. The College Board, the people who manage the SAT, they manage the CSS. So if you just go to Google and type CSS financial aid profile, they'll come right up. You can click. It's some of the handouts we have that we'll give out, but you can find all kinds of information on their website as well as the handouts we'll give out anyway. for how to do that. For students, I know it's kind of awkward and uncomfortable. If you're getting ready to apply for college, you're going to have to be prepared for this. With the FAFSA, with the CSS, with other private colleges' financial aid forms, you are going to have a really frank conversation with your parents. They're going to have to pull out tax returns, and they're going to have to provide information about how much money they've made in the past year, 2 years, whatever it is, depending on the school. So you're going to have those conversations with your parents. I know it can be uncomfortable. It's got to be done. If you want to be considered for financial aid, that's got to happen. There's just really no way around it. For students who might be in the situation where you have parents who are divorced and they're not living in the same household, the FAFSA and the CSS have mechanisms to handle that. CSS just has the non-custodial parent fill out a separate form in a profile, and they have tools to kind of walk you through that. FAFSA has a process for that as well, and they have tools to kind of help you with that. If you are in a situation where you have a non-custodial parent that's not around, you're not the first student in that situation, and you won't be the last, and you can contact the FAFSA or CSS folks, and they'll kind of walk you through the process of indicating that. So don't automatically think, if I can't get the information from parents, that I can't do this. You can do the best you can. But again, kind of start that conversation with your parents now if you have ready, so that you're prepared to get those financial forms filled out as soon as you can to apply for as much financial aid as you possibly can. Once students are accepted to college, again, things like early admission or early decision aside, where you're committed to a particular institution if you applied that way. For regular admission, you can apply to 12 colleges and get accepted to 11 of the 12. By May 1st, you have to notify the school you will be attending. That's decision day. And the expectation is that you notify them whether or not you're coming. If you don't, they're assuming you're not, and they're moving on down their wait list. So you'll have a period of time. Most students, again, it depends on whether you apply early admission, regular. It depends on when the school's deadlines are, but most students know sometime between January and March whether or not they have been accepted to the schools they've applied to. And then you have until May 1st to notify the school you'll be attending. Again, the kinds of things you're going to want to get together for the Common App: your transcripts, so you can put in courses and grades, test scores, including the dates you took them, info, any kind of academic honors, awards, achievements that you've gotten. There is a spot in the Common App, and again, every college is a little bit different, whether or not they recommend them or require them, or what their guidelines are for who you can pick. But many colleges prefer or require letters of recommendation. And so you'll need to put in the Common App your profile. You need to identify who those recommenders will be, who will be writing those letters for you. And they will do that through the system. They will be notified by the Common App, and there's a process that they'll follow to get those submitted. They don't hand you a letter of recommendation for you to send in. It goes directly from the writer, the letter writer, to the Common App for the colleges. When you list the folks who will be writing your letters of recommendation, you will have to sign a FERPA release. It's a signature right through the system. But essentially, if you're asking a teacher to write a letter of recommendation for you, presumably you want them to talk about your academic performance and abilities and other characteristics about yourself. You're going to have to sign the FERPA waiver giving them permission to talk about your grades and how you've performed in class and those kinds of things. Otherwise, they can't write a letter for you. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's not a big deal, but you will have to sign the FERPA release. Otherwise, teachers, counselors, those kinds of folks that you're picking from your school who might write a letter for you would be very limited in terms of what they could say if you don't sign that waiver. So just be prepared. You're going to have to sign that release so that they can talk about you. With the Common App essays, this is one of the most overlooked parts of the application, which is unfortunate because it's one of the most important parts of your application. Your grades and test scores say a little bit about you, but they don't really tell us all that much. The essay you write is your opportunity to really tell someone your story, who you are as a person, why you're interested in that school, what you're looking for in life. And you can really convey a lot about who you are in your personal statement. So I can't stress enough, don't wait till the last minute to do it. Take your time, go through multiple drafts, get feedback from multiple people, really put forth some effort on those essays, because that's really your best opportunity to hook someone and get them really interested in you as a student. When you write your essay, no matter what topic you pick or prompt you choose, you want to portray yourself as passionate about something. You want to show them you're an interesting person that has interests in life, things that drive you. You want to show you're well prepared academically, athletically, personally, whatever it is, but you want to show you're prepared to succeed in college. You want to show that you can succeed in a challenging environment. So it's okay to talk about challenges you've overcome in an essay, those sorts of things. But you want to show them that you're ready to go, that you're ready for the challenge of college. And you want to show them that you're a potentially outstanding representative of that school. So the 1920 and the 2021 Common App did not change any of their essay questions at all. This year they made one small change, but otherwise the essays are very similar to previous years. So these first two up on the screen now are 2 of the 7 options you can choose for the Common App. The first one, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's meaningful. If you believe that your application would be incomplete without sharing that information, that's the essay for you. So you would write that essay and tell your story about what's really unique or interesting about you that you don't think comes across in any other part of your application. So that's an option for students. For a lot of kids, they think that that's the easy one. That is often the hardest prompt. And I'm not saying to anyone, don't do it. And I'm not saying do it because it's the hardest and you think you'll get brownie points, because it doesn't really work that way either. This is a very challenging question for a lot of students, a very challenging prompt for students to write an essay about. With the Common App essay, you get 650 words, and that's all you get. That's about 3/4 of a page. If we're talking like, 12-point Times New Roman, double space, it's not a lot of space. And you're really trying to convey who you are in a very little bit of space. If there's something really important to you and you feel driven to convey it, go for it. But don't pick that question because you think, oh, it's easy. I just say a few things about myself and I'm good. The second question, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, failure. How did it affect you? What did you learn? A lot of students actually shy away from this question because they feel like they don't want to talk about a setback or a failure. If you've had some sort of setback in your life and you've learned something from it, this can be an excellent prompt to use for your essay. As long as it's not 650 words that are a litany of excuses. If you had a setback and you just straight up say, happened to me, these are the things I had to learn to do to overcome it. These are the things I've learned how to do now to not find myself in that situation again. This is what I've learned overall from the experience. It can be an excellent essay that portrays you in a really positive light and shows admissions officers that you can handle hardship, You can get past it. You can move on. You can continue to succeed. So don't necessarily be afraid of that question, thinking that admitting failure at something is a problem. There's nothing wrong with admitting failure if you can show how you've learned from it. If you had a setback and you didn't learn anything, please don't pick that question. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? This is a really good way for students to show intellectual curiosity, independent thinking, the kinds of things that a lot of schools are interested in. So if you have a good situation in your life that fits this prompt and you feel comfortable writing about it, this can be an excellent prompt. The biggest mistake students make with this one is they reflect on the time they questioned or challenged an idea, and they talk about what prompted them to challenge it, and then they stop. And so we read their essay and we're waiting for the outcome, and it never comes. And you get to the end of their essay and you want to just slam your head onto the desk in front of you because they've told you like 3/4 of the story and you never got the end. So this can be an excellent question. If you pick it, you absolutely must put in your essay what the outcome was. You cannot leave the admissions officer hanging when they're reading the application and getting to the end. It's a massive letdown. You get all the way through and the end of the story is missing, like someone ripped out the last few pages of a book. So if you pick that question, you absolutely must include the outcome. Like, what happened? What decision did you make after you questioned or challenged some sort of belief or idea? Where are you at now? Tell me the end of the story. This is the new one, the one in white. Reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? So that is the brand new question for this year that has not been used in previous years. So if someone has done something that surprised you and you have it had some sort of impact on you where you're grateful, you've been motivated to do something because of what they've done, this might be a good essay prompt for you. Again, though, from having read essays with a lot of these are very similar prompts, if you're going to pick this one, it's very similar to the previous one. You really need to indicate if someone has done something for you and how it impacted you. What has it motivated you to do now moving forward? Make sure you include that. Don't just talk about what someone has done for you and forget the last part of that. Make sure you tell the whole story. These are ones from previous years as well that you can still use this year. Discuss an accomplishment, event, realization that sparked a period of personal growth and new understanding. So it's the same kind of thing. Make sure you tell a complete story in your essay. What did you learn? You're talking about something that sparked personal growth and development. So you need to make sure you tell us what you learned from that. How did you grow personally? Don't tell us this happened and I grew personally. Show us and tell us how you grew personally. What did you learn? The next one, describe a topic, idea, concept you find so engaging it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? Where do you go when you want to learn more? That tends to be a commonly selected essay prompt for, in many cases, I've seen it with kids who want to major in engineering, particularly the kind of kids that want to do mechanical type engineering and they're tinkerers. And they can write a great essay how they get completely lost in time as they're working on something, anything. And next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night and they haven't started their homework because they've been fixing whatever in the garage. That can be a great essay for some kids. It doesn't have to just be for kids that want to major in engineering. That's a pretty common one for those kinds of kids. But what really gets you interested, where you just are so into what you're doing that you're not thinking about anything else. So that can be an excellent topic. But again, make sure you convey why this particular idea, topic, whatever it is, so motivates you. Don't tell us what it is without the why. And then the last one, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, one of your own design. This is not a really commonly selected option, but it can be an excellent option. If previous prompts really resonate with you and you want to tell us some other story, this is the option you pick and go for it. Just make sure you're telling us, whatever you're telling us, that it's a complete story, that we get a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. This bonus option was on last year's application, and I'm told it will show up on this one as well. You can choose to do it or not do it. There's absolutely no bonus points if you do it, no penalty if you don't. But for kids who had COVID disruptions, this is your opportunity to tell the admissions officers a little bit about that impact on you. So completely optional. Do it if it fits your experience. Don't if it doesn't. Last year it had a 250 word limit. My expectation is this year it'll probably be the same. So if that fits for you, go for it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Supplemental essays. Some schools you might apply to require them and others don't. So again, when you get your college list together, you can look at the requirements for those schools and you'll see if colleges you're interested in require a supplemental essay. This is another reason why you really want to create your profile and start listing your colleges early. So you can start looking at not just the Common App essay prompts that you have to do regardless. You have to pick one of those 7, but what colleges you're interested in have supplemental essays and what are the prompts for those, so you can start planning ahead for writing those essays. Again, the college require supplemental essays, do it for a reason. It's not to make your life miserable. It's not to weed kids out. It's not to convince you not to apply because it's too hard. They're asking those kinds of questions because they really want the answer. They think those questions are important for them to determine whether or not you're a good fit for their school. So you really need to plan ahead and take those questions very seriously. I cannot stress this enough. It's much harder for kids these days because of social media and access to information all over the internet. It's much different for you guys than it was way back when I applied in college, and I hate to admit it, but the web did not exist when I applied for college. You need to be honest. Whatever you're sharing on your application and with admissions, whatever you're putting in your essays needs to be the truth. There are a great many colleges and universities that have staff that look through social media of prospective candidates, and they are trolling through all kinds of stuff all over. And if they find things on the web that are clearly very different from how you have represented yourself, you are now out of the admissions process. You're done. So I really can't stress this enough. Whatever you choose to share, it needs to be the truth. Be honest in your application, every aspect of your application. You need to share things that are meaningful and specific to you. You don't want to tell the same kind of story that everyone else is telling. You really need to take a few minutes and do some self-reflection and think about who you really are, what makes you tick, how are you different from other people, and then how do you convey that to colleges and universities, because that's how you will stand out. You've got to show what you have that other students don't, and every student has something that's unique about themselves. You've got to figure out what it is. Your responses should fit specific college culture and values. And we'll go through some kind of sample supplemental essay questions, and we'll talk about what sort of fit that might be. You want to show your personality. You don't want to write the essay of a robot where it's just really rote and grammatically perfect, but boring as all get out. You want to show who you are as a person. You want to show some personality. You want to come across as likable. It's a hard truth, but you want the admissions officers to like you. If they like you, they're more likely to go to bat for you. It is okay to match the tone of the college, and similar to the fit, we'll talk about that because every college is a little bit different. Babson College, so it's a smaller liberal arts college. It's a high academic school. They're very well known for business programs, entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. This is one of the questions that they have used in previous years. Your moments arrived. Share with us the moments or experiences that have led you to apply to Babson College. And they give the choice of 500 words or a 1-minute video. Basically, they're looking for what have been your life experiences that have drawn you to apply to this school. So if you're interested in studying entrepreneurship there and you've had experience, starting your own business in high school, stringing lacrosse sticks or whatever it is, that might be something that you talk to them about, and you show how your interest in entrepreneurial spirit and that kind of thing has driven you to them. So that's kind of something like that. Boston College, Jesuit education considers liberal arts a pathway to intellectual growth and character formation, and they ask about your beliefs and values. This is one of 5 choices that they've given students in the past. They give you 400 words or less. What I would say is, Boston College has an excellent lacrosse team. If you were thinking, I really want to go to Boston College because I want to play lacrosse there, and you're looking at this question thinking, I had no idea it was a Jesuit school, probably you might want to reconsider whether or not if you don't know those kinds of basic information about a school, you might want to reconsider, do you really know enough about a school to decide whether or not you want to go there? Maybe learn a little more about the school and then make a decision, am I applying or am I not applying? So if there are things in the questions that a school provides that surprised you, take a few minutes to decide, again, is this the right school for me or not? If it is, great, but keep in mind the question they're asking and what they want to know from you. So here they're clearly talking about intellectual growth and character formation. They're asking about beliefs and values. A huge mistake students can make here is writing an essay that never talks about character or values, where you just talk about what you believe or how you've grown intellectually and you leave off the whole other end of the picture. So kind of keep that in mind. If an institution gives you a question like this, they want you to cover everything. They want you to talk about intellectual growth, but they also want you to talk about character and values. So don't answer only one at the expense of the other. CalTech, pranks are really common there. So they actually have a question about that. They tell you about that. They ask what you want to do for fun. It's okay to just talk to them about something. They only give you 250 to 400 words. It's one of 4 choices. But if you really want to go to CalTech, it is totally okay to just talk about what you do for fun. That's what they want to know. It might not be the right thing to talk about with another school, but at this particular school, go for it. Just talk to them about what you do for fun. Dartmouth, they talk about the world's troubles are your troubles. There's nothing wrong with the world that better human beings can't fix. So which of the world's troubles inspires you to act? They only give you 250 to 300 words. That's a tough one. It's one of 6 choices. But again, if you want to go to a school like this and you pick a question like that, they're asking you which of the world's troubles. So you want to pick something that is more universal or global in nature. Not asking about a local problem. They're asking you big picture. So if you pick a question like this, you want to pick big picture. Duke, they have an option. They give you only 2 choices most years. So they talk about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. They tell you what it entails. And they tell you if you want to share with them more about yourself and your identity, and a previous essay prompt didn't do that for you, tell them what you want them to know. So again, they give you a couple of choices. If this essay prompt really resonates with you and you have something to share, go for it. If this particular essay choice does not resonate with you, pick another option. Georgetown, again, this is one of the universities not use the Common App, but they do have essays that they require and a lot of other similar requirements. You just do it outside the Common App. In their case, they will typically require 2 supplemental essays. One is fairly general, like the Common App, and the other will be specific to a major that you've indicated you're interested in on your application. So in this case, if someone picked some sort of healthcare major, what they want to know is what factors have influenced your interest in studying healthcare. Please specifically address your intended major. A lot of colleges and universities will have a supplemental essay question about a specific major. And sometimes it's only certain majors that will require those types of supplemental essays. They're pretty common in things like healthcare, engineering. But again, it varies from school to school. It varies from major to major. If you're interested in those majors in one of those schools and you get something like this, be honest about what your interest is in that field. I will tell you with healthcare specifically, one of the biggest problems, there are probably right now thousands of students interested in nursing who are practically as we speak writing an essay that says something to the effect of, ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a nurse. When I was a child, I would put Band-Aids on my dolls, and they'd go on from there. Almost anyone that's served on an admissions committee for nursing or other health programs has seen some version of that essay thousands and thousands of times. So many times that when you read the first sentence or two, you have already just completely shut down. You're done before you've even started the essay. So what I would say to you is, if you have to write an essay about a particular major, don't ever start it with the ever since I was a little girl, ever since I was a kid, ever since I was whatever. Because what happens is one of two things for most admissions officers. They're thinking either you're telling the truth and you slapped Band-Aids on your dolls when you were a kid, and some relative told you you should be a nurse and you thought, okay, and you never gave it any more thought. And no one really wants to accept a nursing student who never gave it any more thought since they were 4 years old. You want someone that's really committed to the profession and understands what nurses do, and this is what they want to do. Or the other option is you're not really sure why you're interested in nursing, or why you're interested in nursing isn't something you feel is safe to share. So you're just telling us what you think we want to hear. Which is also not a good look in an essay. So if you're applying to a school where you have to write specifically about why you are interested in a particular major, take some time, give it some real thought, and do your absolute level best to share what your real interest is in that major. Share some things you know about that major that appeal to you or appeal to you about that profession. Don't kind of give the trite answer of I've always wanted to do this, or I want to do this major so I can go to medical school because, my dad was a doctor and all my uncles are doctors and my grandfather was a doctor, or my entire family's been engineers, or they're all firefighters, or whatever it is. They've all been teachers. Schools want to know what's driving you and what is your interest in that major or profession. They don't care about what someone told you when you were a little kid. They're not interested in what everyone else in your family does for a living. Why do you want to do this? So if you get one of those essays, whether it's required or optional, and you pick it, just be very careful and make sure you share a real, genuine interest in the profession, and that you show you understand what that profession is all about. I also can't tell you how many times I've sat on admissions committees, and someone has been applying for a particular healthcare program and they're describing a very different health profession. It's really common for people to apply to nursing programs and apply and describe the work of a physician, or the other way around. So it really helps to demonstrate in those essays you have some understanding of what that profession is really all about. Northwestern intentionally leaves this question open. They often ask students, explain why you would like to attend Northwestern. While there's no one right answer, there are absolutely wrong answers. They do not want to hear all about your love of Chicago, or why Lake Michigan is just the greatest thing ever, or how you've got to go there because their lacrosse team is just the absolute best. They really want to know why you want to attend Northwestern for your college education. What intellectually interests you at that school? What do you think is unique and great about that particular institution? So don't kind of give them that sort of basic answer of, I love the town, I love the lake, I love the lacrosse team. They want something much more specific about their institution that really interests you. So don't kind of fall into that trap. California schools often ask why students want to go there. And the worst thing you can say is because you're close to Disneyland, because you're close to the beach, because the weather's great. Those are wrong answers. They know they're close to the beach. They know they're close to Disneyland. They know the weather's great. But there are lots of institutions close to the beach, close to Disneyland, weather's great. They want to know why you want to go to that specific institution, and that's what you need to tell them. Pitzer College is a small liberal arts college in California outside of LA. They're very well known for a lot of social justice, environmental action, those kinds of things. So here they have a question that asks about a cause that's meaningful to you. They give you 650 words or less. It's one of 3 choices. So if you pick something like that, hopefully you know something about the school and you know they're very much into putting beliefs into action and doing things like building recycling programs and all kinds of things like that. So you might want to pick something that sort of relates to causes that the school has shown an interest in. Because if you're wanting to show you're a good fit for that school, this is an excellent way to do it. Pomona is a sister college to Pitzer. They're right next door. They're both part of the Claremont colleges. So here they talk about changing the world either as a hero or small bits of consistent work from sort of an average honest worker. And whichever one you aspire to be, what impact do you want to have on your community? So they don't give you much space, 250 words or less. They give you a couple of choices. This is one of the few that they've used in the past. What they're really looking for is, how do you want to impact a community? So make sure you tell them that. So don't just tell them that you're interested in working on climate change and then not tell them what kinds of things you want to do. Give them specific examples of things that matter to you. You have to be involved in a project on cleaning up the ocean, or you regularly go out every summer and help clean the beach, or whatever it is you do, but talk to them about impact you have had or want to have, or both. But make sure you actually cover the impact and not just talk about a cause. University of California, here they talk about creativity and different ways to express creativity. They give you 350 words or less. In the past, and I believe when the new application comes out, it'll be pretty similar. They typically give about 8 options, and you have to answer exactly 4 of 8. So this is one of the options you can pick. But if you pick a question like this, you need to talk about what kinds of things you do and how that expresses your creativity. Don't just say, I do this to express my creativity. Talk about how that helps you express your creativity so they see the full picture, the complete story. I will say this for anyone who wants to apply to any UC school. When they tell you you must answer exactly 4 of 8, they mean it. It's a way to weed out kids that aren't paying attention or don't care. Don't answer all 8 questions thinking they're going to take your best 4 and it's going to be great. They're not kidding when they tell you answer exactly 4 of 8. And for a lot of other institutions, when they give you instructions, follow the instructions they give you. University of Chicago. I love this school's application process. They are wonderfully weird and bizarre, and they are super well known for absolutely crazy supplemental essay questions that are so much fun. And if you look at their supplemental essay questions and you think, oh my gosh, these are ridiculous, University of Chicago is not the right place for you. If you look at their supplemental questions and you think, oh my gosh, this is awesome, it might be a really good fit for you. These are actual questions they have asked in the past. So one they had was, do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? And they attribute the quote to Eleanor Roosevelt. And we all know that was not Eleanor Roosevelt. Anyone who's a Clint Eastwood fan can probably sort of recognize that one. But they give you the option of picking a famous quote, selecting someone else who said it, and talk about the implications of that. What happens when something is not attributed correctly? They have fun ones like Joan of Arkansas, Queen Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Babe Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they want you to mash up historical figures and basically make up a story about a fake person. They're really looking for creativity, intellectual creativity, interest, fun. They'll usually give you quite a few options, usually 7, 8 options. Often they'll give you the option of writing your own question. They've even done things like asked, if you were a rock, what kind of rock would you be and why? Those sorts of things. For a school like the University of Chicago, it would be totally okay to say you would be a Rolling Stone and then spend the whole rest of your essay talking about how much you love Mick Jagger. Doesn't work at a lot of other institutions, but that is the kind of thing that you could write about with the University of Chicago. So earlier when we talked about having your answers fit the college, or you can be quirky if the college is, this is kind of an example of that. Pitzer's activism, CalTech's kind of humor and pranks, University of Chicago's sort of funky wit. So you kind of want to make sure as you're looking at these questions and getting a feel for these schools that your answers, your essays really align with what the school is, because they're looking for kids that fit with their institution and who they are. And you want to apply to and be accepted at schools where you are a good fit. Boulder talks about no two Buffs are alike. They support diversity and inclusion, pick a unique identity, describe its significance. It can be anything. Anything you want at all, 250 to 650 words. In the past, this has been the only option. When they talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, pick an identity, it doesn't have to be race, gender, religion. Your identity can be your identity as a bass player, and you can spend your essay talking about that, and it's completely okay. So this is the kind of institution where really they want you to pick any identity. It doesn't have to be that sort of standard fare that everyone immediately thinks of. It doesn't have to be race, gender, religion, the obvious stuff. You can pick anything that you identify with and write about that. Michigan, it's very similar. They talk about many different communities that people belong to. They go a little bit different route. They want you to pick a community where you belong and describe that community and your place in it. So again, it doesn't have to be, and they kind of specify in the question, it doesn't have to be race, gender, religion sort of thing. It can, if that works for you. But if you are absolutely obsessed with Mediterranean food and you want to talk about your place in that community, go for it. It's totally okay. In the past, this has been one of 2 required questions that they've had. UNC Chapel Hill, if you could change one thing about where you live, what would it be and why? They only give you 200 to 250 words. It's one of 3 choices. This can be a really good question for students if there is something that you'd like to change. And you can talk about what change you might make and how it might positively influence you or your community or whatever it is. If you pick a question like this, UNC or some other school, just be careful that you don't pick something that you would change that is very important to the school and its identity. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. So UNC Chapel Hill, obviously in North Carolina. If you happen to be from, say, a similar sized town in Georgia, you wouldn't necessarily want to talk about what you would change is you would move your town out of the South. Probably not a good answer if you want to go to UNC Chapel Hill, because I guarantee you the admissions officer reading your application is wondering why on earth are they applying here? Do they not know we're in the South? So kind of just keep those things in mind as you pick your essay prompts and write your essays. UT Austin, why are you interested in the major you indicated as your first choice major? Again, they only give you 250 to 300 words. It's one of 3 required questions. UT Austin will typically ask about majors as one of the questions. So if students are interested in applying anywhere in the UT system, that's a pretty common question. Again, it's just like previous examples we looked at. You want to show some sort of real, genuine interest and understanding in that major and the profession that it would potentially lead to. Yale, this is kind of a fun one. Their colleges typically host conversations with guest speakers, and so one of the questions they ask you is what person, past or present, would you invite to speak, and what question would you ask? So that's a real fun one. You can pick anyone you're interested in, and you can say, this is the person I'd pick, and this is the question I would ask. They also have a question you can teaching a Yale course. What's it called? Name the course whatever you want. It could be the physics of Harry Potter. I don't know, but if that's what you're interested in. These are kind of funky though. They only give you 200 characters, which is about 35 words. These are really challenging supplemental essay questions because you really have to think about what you want to convey and say it in very little space. But these kinds of questions are so much fun. I love questions like this. If you hate questions like that, Yale might not be the place for you. So just kind of something to think about. Whatever essay prompt you pick, for the 7 Common App essay prompts, for any of these supplemental essay prompts where they give you options, pick a question that allows you to show who you are as a person. Read all the questions, think about them, pick the one that best allows you to show who you are as a person. You want to use that standard essay question and the supplemental essay questions, if there are any, to reveal information about yourself that is not seen elsewhere in your application. And what I mean by that is, if you're writing your personal statement or essay and anywhere in it you are telling the admissions officer what your test scores or GPA are, you need to remove it immediately. If you're telling them that you had an intellectually rigorous course load in high school and you took 4 years of honors science and 4 years of honors math, remove it immediately. The admissions officer already knows how much honors English, math, science, whatever it is you took. They know AP courses. It's in your transcript. You've provided that to them. They know what your test scores are. They know what your GPA is. Don't waste the limited space they give you telling them things they already know or will know as soon as they turn the page to the next part of your application. They give you very little space on these essays. Do not waste it telling them things they already know. Make sure you're telling them something different that they can't figure out by looking through anything else in your application. That's probably the most important thing to remember when you're writing these essays, whether it's the standard essay, supplemental essays. Do not rehash stuff they already know. They're going to be reading through a lot of applications fast. They want to get to know you, and they want to not be bored. They want you to tell them an interesting story about who you are. So reciting over and over your GPA, your courses taken, your test scores, boring. Tell them who you are. Tell them something interesting about yourself. You want to highlight your personal strengths, whatever those are, and for everyone, it'll be a little bit different. Personal interests, life experiences that showcase your values, your priorities, whatever it is. Again, be honest and provide examples. There's nothing worse than a student spending a huge chunk of an essay talking about how they're meticulous and a perfectionist and detail-oriented, and their essay is filled with typos and grammatical errors and those kinds of things. Don't tell me something about yourself without showing me something about yourself that fits. For those of you who are thinking you want to play lacrosse in college or any other sport and are interested in athletics, a huge mistake a lot of athletes make is they decide that their main Common App essay and their supplemental essays is going to be all about their sport. So all the essays they write, all about lacrosse or all about tennis or all about basketball or all about whatever the sport is. Don't do that. Odds are good. First, in your activities, you've probably already indicated to the admissions officer that you played 4 years of lacrosse in high school, or you did 4 years of basketball, or you play soccer and you compete on a club that travels all over the world, or whatever it is. That's probably elsewhere in your application, in your activities, extracurricular section. So as an admissions officer, they'd already know that. Odds are good also if you've been speaking with coaches at some of these colleges that you're interested in. The coaches may have already had some conversations with the admissions officers that your application is coming, that they are interested in you playing a particular sport at their school, that they've been working to recruit you, that they may have even already made you an offer. So those kinds of conversations may have already occurred. So the admissions officer, odds are good, already knows you're an athlete who's interested in playing at that particular institution. So don't waste your limited space, again, telling them something they already know. And quite frankly, if you've got years of a sport on your application and you have a coach talking to the admissions officer saying, hey, I've made this kid an offer, their application is coming in, that admissions officer already knows you're a serious athlete, you're interested in playing college athletics. Tell them something else about yourself that's really interesting, that makes you stand out from everybody else. You don't want to come across as a really one-sided person who does nothing but go to school and play a sport. There's more to every student than those couple of things. Or I go to school and do student council, or I go to school and I belong to this club. Everybody has more aspects of their personality. Take the time to show that. Don't make your application all about a sport. It's not going to make it easier for you to get in. Show who you are as a whole, complete person, multiple facets of yourself. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you're asked about a major, or even a generic who you are as a person, the whole ever since I was a kid, I wanted to do whatever is not who you are as a person. So show some growth, maturity, some intellectual thought. Show who you are now, not what people told you when you were a kid. What are you interested in now? What are you all about? What do you like to do? What's really unique about yourself? I know it's a lot of information, and for a lot of kids, they think, oh, 650 words, it's not going to be that bad. I'm going to write it. I'm going to tell them who I am. Okay, I can do this. It's fine. It's not quite that easy. And we'll talk about some things that will help students write a better essay, whether it's the regular sort of standard Common App prompt essay or a supplemental essay. But again, do not rehash anything that's in your application or transcripts. You get very little space in those essays to really share with admissions officers who you are and what makes you stand out from everybody else. And then hundreds or thousands of applications every admission cycle, depending on the school and how many admissions officers they have. Don't bore them with stuff they've already just read about you when they flipped through your transcripts, or flipped through your test scores, or flipped through your list of activities. Tell them something they don't already know. Again, don't underestimate the importance of that statement. Do not procrastinate. Don't wait till the last minute. Start now. A couple of things I would really recommend doing: get a draft together and get multiple people to read it, people you trust to give you honest feedback. It's okay to have your parents read an essay or supplemental essay if you're comfortable with that. But understand that your parents know you and love you, and they will be reading your essay with an understanding of who you already are. So you might not convey an idea very well to a stranger, but your parents read your essay and they understand exactly what you mean because they know you. So it's still great to get feedback from someone like your parents, and they can certainly help you with typos and grammar and all kinds of stuff. But understand the kind of feedback your parents can will be a little bit limited because, again, they know you, they love you, they know what you mean, they know what you're trying to convey in most cases. So you'll also want to get someone who does not know you quite as well. Maybe a teacher you have now starting fall semester of your senior year who you haven't had before, who you've only been in their class a month. You don't know them very well. They don't know you very well. Maybe you ask them to read your essay. They won't know you as well. They won't necessarily know what you're trying to convey. So if they read your essay and they understand exactly what you're trying to share, it's a good sign. If they say to you after they read it, I'm not sure if you mean this or this, or is this really what you want to do, or is this what you're really trying to say, it's excellent feedback that will allow you to kind of tweak your essay to be a little more clear. Because the admissions officers who will be reading your essay are not going to know you like your parents. So, yep, absolutely. Go to your parents, get good feedback, but go to people also that don't know you as well, who will give you an honest appraisal of what they think of your essay and how you're coming across. Sometimes students write an essay where they think they're portraying confidence and drive, and it comes across as maybe a little bit arrogant. And someone who doesn't know you as well can say, maybe you want to tweak it a little bit here. It sounds a little bit much. So again, start early, get a draft, get feedback from multiple people you trust who will give you honest feedback about your essay. Try not to use cliches or quotations. When you are applying to colleges, the admissions officers really want to get to know you as a person. They don't want to see quotes from a bunch of other people. They want to know who you are, not who that person was. So try to avoid those kinds of things. I know it seems kind of counterintuitive because I'm telling you, you need to share with the admissions folks who you really are. And in some sense, it's all about you. But you don't want every sentence to be, I did this, I like this, I. It gets really old really fast, and it tends to start coming across as very self-centered. So you want your essay to be about you, but not me. And again, if you get feedback from multiple people, you can kind of tweak and readjust to make sure that you're telling the story of who you are in a really positive way that conveys who you are the way you want to be seen. Give examples or evidence to back up the kinds of things you're saying about yourself. Whatever it is, don't write an essay all about your intellectual curiosity and never tell me anything that you're curious about or you're intellectually interested in. Those kinds of things. So just make sure you give some sort of example so that we can kind of see what you're saying. We want to know who you are, but we want to actually be able to see it. So give examples. That's something that's important. Some of the next advice I can give are kind of things, really don't do this. When you're writing your essay, I don't care if, like Cal, Stanford, they're rivals in a lot of ways. You don't want to write an essay for Stanford all about how they're better than Cal. They don't care. They don't want to hear it. They want to know why you're interested in Stanford. What do you think is so great about Stanford? What about Stanford really ticks for you? They're not interested in you bashing Cal in your Stanford application or vice versa. Any school really, they don't want to hear about why some other school is awful, some other major is garbage, these other sports aren't real sports. So you want to be positive. You want to talk about who you are, what you're interested in, why you want to be there, what you love, not why everything else is not good enough. And again, this kind of goes without saying, but please, please, please check, double check, triple check, quadruple check. Do not submit your essay with typos and grammatical errors. You have all the time in the world to work on these essays. There's no excuse for submitting things that are just filled with errors. There's just none. A tip I will give you for that, it's going to sound really stupid, but it works phenomenally well. What happens is you write an essay and you decide you're going to proofread it and you quietly read it, because we're not in kindergarten anymore. We don't read out loud. You quietly read it and it looks good and you submit it. And 3 days later, you go back and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, I typed the twice in a row. How did I miss that? You missed it because you wrote your essay and then you quietly read your essay and your brain knew what you meant to say. And so while you were quietly reading your essay, your brain fixed it for you. So what you need to do, aside from having other people help proofread, you write your essay. When you think you're done, you walk away. A few hours a day, whatever it is, you walk away for a good period of time. And when you come back, you're going to feel like an idiot. You need to read your essay out loud, because your brain cannot fix your mistakes quietly if you are reading out loud. If you're reading out loud, your brain will try and fix the mistake because it knows what you meant to say, but it's getting feedback from your ears and it can't do it. So read it out loud. I know it's awful. I feel stupid every time I do it. Do it anyway. Every single time. Take some time off, read it out loud, because your brain cannot fix your mistakes quietly if you're reading it out loud. You'll stop when you hit it and it's like, then it's so obvious and you fix it. So make sure you take the time, read your essays out loud before you submit them. Make sure they are correct and they sound the way you want them to sound. Other mistakes, don't badmouth anyone in an essay, even if the essay prompt is, tell us about a challenging time, and you had a teacher that was particularly difficult. You can describe the situation and what you learned from it, but do not sit there and say, that was the worst teacher I ever had. She was awful. She doesn't even understand history. I don't know why she hasn't been fired yet. No. You can describe a situation, how you had a challenging time in your history class. These are the things you learned from it. This is how you overcame it. But, and it could be the worst teacher in the world. Don't say that in your essay. You can just quietly think that to yourself and never say it out loud. when you do things like that, admissions officers are sitting there reading your essay wondering, what are you going to be saying about the teachers at that school, the staff at that school? What are you going to be saying about that school later? If you're going to sit here now bad-mouthing your high school teachers, how long will it be before you're bad-mouthing your college professors? And nobody wants that. So just don't do it. In the end, this is what colleges and coaches really want to know. Are you prepared to succeed? Can you begin performing immediately? Are you ready to go? Intellectually, emotionally, are you prepared for college? So that's what you want to show them. You want to show some level of self-awareness and maturity in your application. Quite frankly, they want to know whether or not they're going to enjoy having you around for the next 4 years. It's another reason why you want to, even if you're talking about difficult situations, keep it positive by talking about how you overcame something, what you learned. You want to come across as a likable person that they're going to want around for the next 4 years. No one wants to look at an application and think, oh, this person does nothing but complain all the time. That person would be great to have around for the next 4 years. I'd love to hear complaining nonstop for 4 years. No one wants that. So you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself as someone that will be fun to have around, enjoyable to have around. You don't have to be a class clown or a prankster or whatever, but you want to portray yourself as a reasonably likable person. Some schools are pickier about this than others, depending on the school's reputation. No matter the school's reputation, if you want to play sports at a school, any sport, you are asked to represent publicly that college and that team. And they want to know if you're going to represent them well. They want your application and your essays and the things you say to show that you have a certain level of maturity and that you have good judgment. Nobody wants to be publicly embarrassed. They just don't. If you have things on your social media, for example, that you're thinking, I don't care. I mean, I wouldn't want my grandma to see it, but my grandma's not on Instagram, so I don't care. Take it off. If there is anything you have on social media that you would not want your grandmother to see, potential college coaches and admissions officers don't want to see it either. The grandmother test is an excellent test. Before you apply, really start looking at any kind of social media, internet presence, whatever it is that you have, and apply the grandmother test. If you would be embarrassed if your grandmother saw it, get it off. If you have friends posting comments on stuff and what you're posting is fine and their comments are things that you would not want your grandmother to see, you need to consider whether or not you want to be following those friends or allowing them to follow you or comment on your social media or whatever it is. Because again, if you don't want your grandmother to see it, probably you don't want admissions officers to see it or potential college coaches to see it. Again, they're really looking at, are you going to be a mature, responsible adult when you get to college? Are you going to represent the school well? Are you going to represent the team well? Do you have good judgment? And the better you are at showing that you will be a positive representation for that school and that team, the more likely you are to get admitted, likely you are to get offers to play a particular sport that you're interested in. But that's really the most important thing, is convey to colleges that you are ready to go, you're prepared to succeed, you have learned things through high school, you are prepared to continue learning through college, that they will like having you around, and that you will represent them well. You will not embarrass them in public. There are kids who have been accepted to colleges who have had their admission rescinded when things have come up after the fact on social media. So I kind of can't stress enough. Make sure your application presents you in the best possible light, but also make sure you've got nothing else out there that's going to contradict what you're presenting in your application or that's going to make you look is emotionally immature or lacks judgment, this is the time to start making sure all of that's cleaned up and you're ready to go. Get your things together now. Again, test scores, transcripts, all that kind of stuff. Whether it's an electronic file, a printed file, whatever it is, start gathering those things. Start making lists. You can handwrite them. You can put them in a spreadsheet, Word doc, whatever you want, of the kinds of activities you've been involved in, how many years you've done things. Start getting those things together. Reasonably soon after August 1st, get that Common App profile set up. Start putting your information in. Start picking some colleges. Look at those deadlines. Look at the prompts and any supplemental prompts. Start working on those essays now, so that you've got time to really work through and put out a good essay. There are a couple of things that, before we finish and take questions, that I'll mention that might help students. So there's a woman, Nancy Duarte, Duarte, and if you go to YouTube and you type Nancy Duarte TED Talk, Art of Storytelling, her talk comes up. About 2 minutes in is where the information starts that's really helpful to students. But she talks about the arc of telling a story. How you have the hero of the story, they have a challenge, they've overcome the challenge, solved the problem, whatever it is. And she talks about how story after story after story tends to follow that arc. And she gives some examples for kids, and because it's a TED Talk, it's very short. It's a really good option for college applicants to look at before they start writing their essays, because it will really help you tell your story. If you kind of follow that arc. If you start with a hook, you tell us something about you, where you've grown from that. So that's a really good option for students. So that's Nancy Duarte. It's her TED Talk on the art of storytelling. And you can find it on TED Talks or on YouTube, but it's absolutely fantastic. And it's very short. Another option I really recommend students do is go to 3-minute thesis. So 3-minute thesis is often science and engineering folks that are doctoral candidates. It varies a little bit around the world, but in the US, the national average start to finish is over 7 years for a hard science or engineering PhD. So these kids do years and years of research, and when they compete in 3-minute thesis, they get one slide they can put up. So like the slide I currently have up, imagine if I had to give this whole talk and I could only have one slide up, and I could do the talk in only 3 minutes. That's what they're doing. They're basically discussing their entire doctoral research project in 3 minutes or less with one slide. So if you type 3-minute thesis, what'll come up is 3-minute thesis, University of Queensland, and you go to that and you can watch some of the past winners and their talks. And I really recommend students do it because, again, you've got very little space to kind of tell the story of your life and what's unique about you. And they have very little space, 3 minutes, one slide, to tell you all about years of doctoral research. And these talks are phenomenal. In 10 minutes, you could watch 3 talks. And the reason I recommend it is it gives you a really good idea of, again, kind of like the things Nancy Duarte talks about, how to start my essay with a hook, get to the important part of my story, and then give the outcome. And so if you listen to 1, 2, 3 of these talks, it's really good for students to kind of get a sense of how to quickly convey a lot of information in a way that makes sense and people can understand. So I really recommend that before you start writing essays. Just watch a few minutes of Nancy Duarte's talk, look at a couple of 3-minute theses talks. Some of these folks are just phenomenal, how much really complex information they can tell you so quickly in a way that makes sense and is really enjoyable. And that's what you're trying to do with your essay. you're trying to tell your story in a really fun way that makes you memorable and makes you stand out. Again, make sure if you haven't registered that you do, so I can send you the handouts. It's southmountainlax.com/college-prep. And we have a moderator who can manage questions. So if anyone has any questions, just type them in, and I'm happy to use a few minutes to answer them if anyone has any questions. Okay, we have no questions. So we'll go ahead and call it a night then. If anyone has questions later, you can always just email southmountainlax@gmail.com. And I'll go ahead and get emailed out handouts on writing personal statements and some of the handouts on the CSS and application process and all that kind of stuff. So I'll get those out to everyone tonight. And again, if you have not registered for the workshop, happy to have you. If you want the handouts, just make sure you register so that I can send you those. And again, if you have any questions later, southmountainlax@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks everyone for coming. And good luck on the college application process.